Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about celebrating Podcast-thon, which unites podcasts around the world for charity. And to do that, we're talking about wildlife rehabilitation. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I am thrilled to be participating in Podcast-thon again this year, and I have a real treat for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, Podcast-thon is about convincing as many hosts as possible to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice, and then to release these episodes simultaneously in a coordinated effort during the same week. As you can imagine, this creates a massive and international wave of inspiring content, and the objective is to raise awareness for a huge number of charities worldwide and shine a spotlight on how you can help. This year is the 4th edition of Podcast-thon. If you are listening when this episode first came out, this is the big week. All week, more than 1,000 podcasts will highlight a charity of their choice. So check out Podcast-thon at podcastthon.org, and you can listen to so many great episodes. I have to say, I really am proud to do this, and it is pretty impressive. Podcast-thon is the world's largest charity podcast event. I am dedicating this episode of my podcast to support Hope for Wildlife because it is a cause that truly matters to me. So more about this in a minute. First, a little bit about my podcast. Women in the Middle is all about getting unstuck, clear and excited about leading your next chapter, especially if you're in your 50s and 60s and are starting to feel that, time just feels differently now. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach, life leadership mentor, and certified Zentangle teacher, and I am so happy to be here with you again. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Hope Swinimer, the founder and director of Hope for Wildlife from Seaforth, Nova Scotia, Canada. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Hope. Born and raised in Argyle, Nova Scotia, Hope spent most of her time outdoors as a child, enjoying everything the natural world had to offer. She knew that she wanted to work with animals in some capacity, and after missing the ocean terribly while attending college, she knew that she wanted to be close to the ocean. While working at Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital as a manager, Hope took her first rehab animal in 1995. It was a robin that had been attacked by a cat. Researching how to care for the bird inspired her to learn more about injured wildlife, and as her knowledge grew, colleagues began sending wildlife-related calls her way. Later that year, she became certified in basic wildlife rehabilitation from the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Association. Hope considered her options and decided to really dig in. She committed to starting a wildlife rehabilitation center at home. With just a few cages in the backyard and a room in her house as a nursery, Hope rehabbed about 40 animals in her first year. And then in 1997, she moved to Seaforth, Nova Scotia, where she received her rehabilitator permit, and it was the perfect location for rehab. Hope for Wildlife continues to evolve as the need for rescue and rehab services increases. They now take up to 7,000 wild animals into their care each year. You are going to love hearing Hope's story, which is not only about her love for wildlife and the natural world, but also about trusting your instinct about your next best step along the road to creating your most fulfilling and meaningful life. Please enjoy this episode. Hi, Hope. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
I am so happy to have you here as part of Podcast-thon, where we are interviewing charities from all over the place to help get some nonprofit action going. And I'm just thrilled to participate in this and to talk to you about wildlife in general and what you have been doing in Hope for Wildlife in Seaforth, Nova Scotia, Canada. So let's get things started. Just tell us a little bit about how this all happened, what your journey was like. How did you think to do this?
A lot of people ask if it was planned, and it really wasn't, although there was always this deep-rooted love for nature, even as a youngster. So it started young and innocently. I landed a job at Dartmouth Veterinary Hospital. I was probably in my early 30s at the time. And immediately just felt welcome. It was a wonderful career choice as a hospital manager there. And we'd get calls all the time. Hey, a bird just hit my window. What do I do? Or my cat just brought home a squirrel. Can you look at it? So it grew from there. And as the manager, I needed to study and learn to make sure I gave people the right answers. And because I had the most amazing bosses in the world, they said, oh, bring it in. We'll look at it. And so what started as 30 or 40 animals a year has grown into, 7,000 a year that we see now. So it really got a life of its own. Hundreds of volunteers jumped on board, and it's been going strong. And I just kind of have gone along with it and enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh my gosh. So you said so many things there that I have questions about. The first thing is you made brief reference to your childhood experience and being really interested in nature. What do you remember noticing about what you loved about it?
Yeah. I grew up in the country and in a small fishing community, and we were all pretty equal. Like everybody was the same, except my dad was a little bit different. He wasn't a fisherman, whereas most of the other dads were. However, I got to see the fishing community, spent so much time on the ocean in the summer. Our summer jobs the fishermen would drop us off on the islands, me and my girlfriend, and we'd pick moss, Irish moss, to make money, and we'd take it home and dry it and sell it. And so there was many, many stories and many memories of growing up on the ocean. So it was truly a lovely childhood. I had the opportunity to be outside a lot. Things were different back then. We sort of leave the house at when the sun come up and came home for supper time and just filled our days, exploring. So I was very quiet as a young lady and probably shy would be the best adjective to describe it. And I had my nose in a book, or I was always writing down thoughts on our natural world and watching the natural world and how it behaved.
That's that's so interesting that you just said that even though you were quiet, you were still actively passionate and you were really very comfortable observing and watching behavior.
You know, I spent a lot of time on the back of a horse watching through the woods and that kind of thing too. So, and it didn't really bother me that I was quieter than perhaps some of my friends or shyer. I just found my place with that, and it was a comfortable place.
Now, did you know that this was a passion? Would you have called it that? Because I find so many people get hung up on that word. Did it seem like just something about who you were and what you liked? Or did you think, you know what, I really like this. I need more of this in my life, maybe even professionally someday?
For me, it was just a part of me, and there was no effort. It was just a longing and a desire. So I always felt I was just along for the drive, and I tended not to say no, even when other people would recommend, oh, you probably shouldn't do that. Even if it was my dad, who I respected greatly. And, he used to say, I don't know why you ask my opinion. You're going to do what you want to do anyway. And we'd just laugh. And he was probably right. But every time I asked his opinion, even if it was different from what I ended up doing, that was okay. And he was okay with that too. So it was a journey of just not being scared, not being nervous about taking on new things, hardly ever saying, no, I don't want to do that. It was if I could see it would do good for the natural world, then I was probably going to be on board for doing it.
Ah, okay. And then professionally, when you took that job that opened everything up for you in Dartmouth, were you specifically looking for a job that was, with animals?
That's a hard question to answer. I've always been one to have a number of different jobs. Um, And so when this one presented itself, and it was something I sort of went after it, a lot of jobs just found me, and I thought, oh, this looks like fun, I'll try it. But when this job presented itself, I really kind of went after it and made it my own. I was hired mainly to do inventory control, purchasing, that kind of thing, but it grew into management and it grew into hiring and firing and making the hospital a safe place. So it really, again, I sort of ran with it because it was just like it was written for me. Everything about it I enjoyed. I was very lucky to have found that kind of life because up to then I'd been working in more office type settings, and they were interesting, but they didn't hold the joy that I had when I worked in the veterinary world.
So when you went after it, it was because of veterinarian stuff? That's why you
I
went
never,
after it?
I never wanted to be a vet. I was one of those few people as a young kid. I remember going to spend a day job shadowing with a doctor. And I just remember going into surgery and thinking, oh, this is like a mechanic. It was like, and it happened to be an orthopedic surgery. So it was a
Boy,
lot,
yeah.
And I thought, oh, not something I really want to do, but I love the people and I love the animals that came through the door. I think I was equally impressed with the combination of working with the clients and their animals and trying to make their life a little bit easier when they came through the door. So I'm glad of my choices. And I
Ah,
actually became a CVPM, which is a certified veterinary practice manager. And a lot of people have never heard of that. And it's a really good career choice. I can remember at Dartmouth Vet, my job was when young people wanted to come in for the day and shadow a doctor, I set that all up. And I'd meet them at the door and I'd introduce them to the veterinarian and all that good stuff. And I worked there 25 years. Once in 25 years did I have someone call in and say, I want to work with the manager. And I said, can you come in tomorrow? It's just like no one ever thinks of that part of the veterinary world. And it really worked well for me. And I really loved it. There were hard days and sad days and complaints and all that kind of thing. But all in all, I'm so, so happy with the choice. And that job really prepared me for running a wildlife rehab because really wildlife rehabilitation is, I look at it as just one big veterinary hospital from beginning to end. And the only difference is we don't have clients, we just have patients. So therefore, we have to do the whole process until they're ready to go home. And home is, of course, their wild world. So I look at it more like a veterinary hospital that I'm running, and it works well.
now tell us about that leap because you mentioned very casually in your story, and I went from 40 clients to, so how did you even get to 40 clients? Like, where did you say to yourself, you know what? I think I want to open a rehab hospital.
I think again, it was one of those things that I didn't say no, so therefore it happened. And I could see it happening. Like each year there'd be more and more animals, and my bosses would be so gracious. They'd call a meeting at the first of every year to decide whether they would continue. They donated all their medical care. So every year I'd go into the meeting, and most times I was pretty sure they would continue on. But the year that they said, Hope, I think we can't do any more, I saw it coming. The numbers were getting so big and they were just having to give too much. And it was interfering in a way with their regular practice. So I sort of saw that coming and they were still very kind about it all and they still helped me, but just in different ways. And so I remember that meeting and they said, we'll help you get your hospital going out at Hope for Wildlife, which did happen, and we came certified by the Nova Scotia Veterinary Medical Association and all that good stuff. But it was like growing up and leaving home, I guess, and making that big step into the real wildlife rehab world.
Now, explain how this started. Where were you putting all these animals to rehab?
I was lucky that it started slow. So when it started, I lived in quite a big community with lots of houses, very little natural world, but it was right on the ocean and there was some greenness around. So, but it was close to the city, so it was convenient for me to go to work and back and forth. And it started in my home and I had about an acre and I built a few cages in the backyard and I can remember when the first skunk sprayed. I think that's when the neighbors started to get a little suspicious. What is this person doing? And uh, and that's when a knock came on my door by government, Department of Natural Resources, saying, what you're doing is not legal. You need a permit. You need permission to be doing this work. And I said, okay, come on in. What do I need to do to make it legal? And that's when the hard work really started on getting the permission, the right. And we were actually the first rehab in Nova Scotia to receive a permit to go ahead and do that. And that was in the 90s. And like I say, I was lucky it grew gradually so I could keep up with it and maintain it and do it in a respectful, professional way. And it's still growing. And yeah, it's been many, many years and it's still growing. Each and every day I get up and think, what exciting new thing can I do to make it just a little bit better for the people that work here and for the wildlife we see?
Wow. So, what you started then in your backyard, and I'm sure it took over part of your house too.
Oh, yeah.
So that is what grew into what you have now.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's big, like I sprawl a little bit, but we have acres and acres and acres, and we have beautiful bobcat units, and we have marine units for the seals and the otters and the ducks and the geese, and we have fox units, we have white-tailed deer enclosures, we have flight cages, we have an isolation area where the really sick animals are recovering, we have our hospital, um, and then we have Fenton Farmhouse, which is where all the babies will start pouring in any day now, and they're all raised up and released back. So and then we have to accommodate all the people that volunteer to work here that come from far away. So we have housing, we put up a solar panel, two solar panel farms so we can kind of have bragging rights that we're off fossil fuel and living off of natural energy. So all those little things have just grown a little bit at a time, day by day. And yeah, it's if you look at the big picture, it can seem a little daunting, but when you look at it bit by bit and just living your life every day, it works out.
Well, it's so amazing to me that just your approach, but your approach of just responding to some needs and some natural momentum. And it's the pivotal point of the hospital saying, you know what, we love you, but we can't handle this anymore. Because that could have been it for you. That was like a fork in the road. I talk a lot about fork in the road. And when you get a fork in the road, you can learn a lot about your decision making in that moment. And when I look at my forks in the road, there's a lot of fear-based decision making, but you did it anyway. So you said, okay, this is big. It's going to get bigger. I'm just going to go with it. It's
I know.
fascinating.
And to me, like everybody knows me around here really well, and they say, "Oh, don't say no. Hope never says no." You know? So it's like, okay. And then when roadblocks come, you're always problem solving. Like you think, what can I do to fix that? There's got to be a way to fix that. And, sometimes you try and fail, but a lot of times you try and it works. I think one of the biggest times that I had a hard decision to make was when they approached me to do the TV show. And
Oh,
I asked advice. I like to chat to people. I like to find out what they think, and what they know about doing a TV show. And almost everybody, including my father, said, "Don't do it." It's not a good thing. Don't do it. All your mistakes will go down in history. Well, guess what? My mistakes have gone down in history, but that's okay because that's how we learn and get better at things. And I never regret doing it. And it's been actually fun and an amazing group of people that come out and do the filming and the people that work here and the volunteers. They like it, and they're kind of proud to say they were on the show, and they tell their family, and so it just gets momentum going and people interested in the natural, learning that wildlife rehab exists. There's a lot of people that don't even know what wildlife rehab
yeah.
is. So even though, yeah, sorry.
The show, and how can we find it?
Oh, so they did it for about it's in season 11. And there's 13 shows per season. It's usually on Cottage Life, but it's here, there, and everywhere.
Oh, it's on Cottage Life. Okay. And what's it called?
Called Hope for Wildlife. And they went to the States too, and they changed the name to Hope in the Wild, but the original one is Hope for Wildlife.
Hope in the Wild.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Interesting.
didn't like that. I liked Hope for Wildlife much, much better. Yeah.
I guess they wanted to make it sound sexy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so give us an example right now. What are some of the animals that are under your care?
Oh, we probably have a couple of hundred patients in right at the moment. And in the summer, that will be 1,000 at any given time. So right now in the winter, we tend to get a lot of owls. There's lots of conflict of, it's a twilight zone when we're traveling to and from work at dark and the bird and the owls are out hunting on the roadways at that same time. Doesn't happen so much in the summer because we're not rush hour traffic isn't in the dark in the summer. Some winters we can get up to 100 owls that have been hit, so we've got a lot of them. It's also birthing season for the gray seal pups, so we get a lot of gray seal pups in, and they're hard cases. The hit by cars are hard cases. The gray seals are difficult. So we get a lot of them in. And then we get a lot of birds. We get a lot of marine animals. We have otters in right now. We don't get the deer in because we usually just do the fawns through the spring, summer, and fall. We've got lots of birds of prey. Our flight cages are full. We get lots of crows and ravens and that kind of thing. Songbirds too that stay for the winter here. So a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's really interesting. And every day is different. There's never a day goes by. We don't get drop-offs. On an average, we get 7 to 8 animals in the winter and in the every day. And in the summer, we get anywhere from 25 to 75 animals each and every day. Our busiest day last year, we had 121 birds come in.
Wow. So it's interesting. When I first went to the University of Guelph for undergrad, and of course there's a vet college there, um, I was from the States at that time, and I go to this beautiful campus, and there's an arboretum, and there is seal research going on there. So there was this outdoor pen and a pool, and it was on my walk to the arboretum. And I just thought, where am I that there are seals in the park?
Pretty special.
It was really special. I just thought that was so unusual. I had never expected that for sure. I was new to Canada too, so I didn't really have a good sense of anything at that point, 1983. That's
Mm.
for sure. It,
University of Guelph has been so good to us. They used to send us a veterinarian each and every year at a very cheap price,
wow.
and they would learn orthopedics and wildlife medicine while they were here. And, they did that for 7 or 8 years, and we still work closely with the University of Guelph. A professor there, Dr. Sherry Cox, her dream is to have wildlife hospitals throughout Canada and in each and every province. And so when I got to know her, she made Hope for Wildlife the first of her veterinary hospitals. So and she's still with us. She's coming down this weekend to put on some classes and stuff. So.
That's amazing. I am shocked that there is not a wildlife rehab place in every province.
There's wildlife rehab facilities, but there's not wildlife rehab hospitals everywhere. A
Oh,
lot of times, regular vets, which have a ton of knowledge, just do the work for the rehabs. But when you get into the science of medicine, we used to say, what's it closer to, a dog or a cat? And, it turns out that the medicine is totally different. Just what I've learned since the 90s, like from like a cephalexin will kill a porcupine, or an oral antibiotic for a white-tailed deer doesn't work because of their complicated digestive systems. You need to give them an injectable. Or like a broken turtle shell, we were taught way back in the 90s just to glue it back together. And now we know that that's wrong, that we wire it back together and let it slowly grow and heal. So just how we've come so far, like when we used to try and do blood work on an animal, your choices on the blood machine was dog, cat, or parrot, which is useless because every species' blood is different. So now we have blood machines that will do 160 different species, and we just key it in and get that data and be able to do an amazing job in analyzing what's wrong with the animal. So there's so many things that have happened that make this world so exciting, and it's a world of research and development, and we're learning each and every day. It really is amazing.
wow. I think you're amazing, Hope. I just love that, like the enthusiasm and the creativity with what you've built and accomplished. It's amazing. And I noticed something on your website about a marten. Can you tell me a little bit more about your relationship with martens and something exciting that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, I've had a love affair. People always ask me, what's your favorite animal? And it really is different all the time because my favorite case might be different than my love. And I've had this deep-rooted passion for the mustelids, like the skunks and the martens and the minks and the weasels and all the fishers. They're all just truly, truly amazing things. So I've always, and where I grew up in Yarmouth, they didn't have martens, and I didn't know a lot about them. But as I grew older, I studied them, and I learned everything I could about them. There's some fascinating facts out there. And I learned that back in the 50s and 60s, just by talking to old timers, which I love to do, they would tell me that, oh, we used to hunt them. And back then their pelts were worth like $50 or $60 a pelt, which was a ton of money back then. and they're pretty well hunted out, not to mention they really like old growth forests too. So, but my dream, and it's been my dream from day one because I've been lucky, I was lucky to be blessed with getting an educational marten. It came from a fur farm, and I was granted permission to keep it and use it for education purposes. And I learned so much by having that marten in my life. But my dream was always to have it so that people could go out into the woods in Nova Scotia and walk through on a quiet, beautiful morning and see a marten running through the treetops. And that's still my dream, and I'm still going to make it happen someday. I met up with people from the Toronto Zoo not too long ago, and I kind of said, I've heard that you've done wonderful work on captive breeding and release programs, and would you be interested in looking at the Nova Scotia marten? And they expressed some interest. So you just never know. And I really hope it goes somewhere. I really hope 10 years from now, we'll be able to see martens in the wild world more often in Nova Scotia. But it's
How
just
many are
something.
left?
From what I've read, they believe about 100 martens in the upper Cape Breton Highlands, of about 100 females left. They aren't really sure of the numbers. They're so elusive and hard to spot. But if you see one, you're very, very blessed, and they're just a beautiful creature. They're endangered in Newfoundland too, and as well as endangered in Nova Scotia. And the Newfoundland marten is a tiny bit genetically different than the Nova Scotia marten. So it's really interesting if you were going to do a captive breed and release program, you would have to make sure you checked all the genetics and that kind of thing. But I think the New Brunswick marten is the same as the Nova Scotia one. So
Wow. I love seeing you so excited about this and still dreaming and scheming and figuring out how you can make a lasting impact on wildlife. Now, there was another thing I noticed on your website. It was something about bears. Now, I have to say, I'm afraid of bears. I am really afraid of bears. Whenever we camp, I'm like, I don't want to go any place that there's bears. I could deal with raccoons. I can deal with some of these other things, but they're so cute. So tell me, what do you have going on with bears?
well, my dream when I created Hope for Wildlife, it was to have permission to rehabilitate all Indigenous wildlife of Nova Scotia. I haven't reached that goal, but it's come a long way. When I started, I wasn't allowed to do bobcat. I am now allowed to rehabilitate bobcat. When I started, I wasn't allowed to do white-tailed deer. The fawns have been added to our permit. And I always wanted to do black bears. And it was always no, no, no. So when I finally got permission to proceed, which was just a few months ago, I got a lot of people that called and wanted to do interviews. And how did that happen? What do you think changed? And what I wanted to say was a lot of nagging. But in honesty, it was a lot more than that. It was a lot of people, a lot of community, a lot of Nova Scotians that spoke out about caring about the well-being of cubs that have been orphaned. The mothers may have been shot, the mothers may have been hit by a car, and the little babies are left behind. And when people understand black bears, they understand that 95% of their diet is grass and grubs and insects and very basic food. They're more scared of you than you are of them. And you learn ways. A big part of what we do is educating people how to live with nature comfortably. And part of what I do for public speaking engagements is what to do if you're going out into the woods and you may see a bear or a coyote. What should you take with you? How do you prepare? How do you behave if you have those encounters? So to me, it's incredibly important to reconnect people. So to replace fear and misconceptions with reality and what to do. So just very logical, basic knowledge. And I'm surprised when we go into the classrooms and I meet young people, sometimes we'll take an animal with us. And there's been occasions where we've presented perhaps a skunk, and there's children that don't know what it is anymore. And that's scary to me. They can't identify these natural animals in our wild world. So I think it's so important to reconnect people so that they aren't fearful, so that they learn to care. And they learn it's okay to care about nature. That's
Oh my
incredibly
gosh.
important.
Yes, it is. Now, I wanted to ask you a question about people. So, as midlife women, What do you think is a special role or something that we could really remember about our role with other people and this message? So I'm thinking about grandchildren, for example, and I'm thinking about, certain types of jobs we may have where we have the ability to bring in more information about living and respecting nature. Do you think we have any particular role at this age and stage?
Oh, definitely. And I think a lot of people are fooled to think that what they say or the time they take doesn't have an impact when it really does. Perfect example is I got a phone call from a lady. She was probably in her 30s or late 20s, and she wanted me to come and speak to her naturalist group. And just as I was getting ready to hang up from the phone call after I'd booked the meeting, she said, I met you one time before. And I said, oh, really? Where did we meet? And she said, when I was about 5 years old, you gave me a little tour of Hope for Wildlife. And it was very tiny back then. And I actually found a photo of her that I'd taken.
No
And
way.
she said, I remember that at 5 years old, and it truly had an impact on how I thought about my natural world growing up. So I don't think there's a person out there, there's not one of us that hasn't taken 5 minutes to chat with a young person, maybe, or an old person, or anybody in between. And your words have an impact on them. So don't ever forget that, because no matter what your passion is, whether it's music or sports or you name it, arts, if you take that time to spend with someone, and it can be 5 minutes, it can have an impact and can change someone's life. I think we forget how much power we really have and how much influence, we have on people's lives. And I know when my grandmother was reaching 100, I was glad to sit down and share and listen to her stories and that kind of thing and learn everything I could possibly learn. And you can be any age to share what's on your mind.
So true. And have you had any mentors in your life who've really made an impact? Because I know I have, and most people have, especially when you're doing something really huge and impactful like you are. So, who's that been for you?
When I was young, my brother he lived a very cool life and he traveled the world. And he started off at a very young age. I don't know if you've ever heard of QSO, but it was a group that took people from, I think, all over Canada and sent them to East Africa or where have you to teach. And my brother went to East Africa and met and fell in love with a Russian lady who, at that time, it was under communist rule and you weren't allowed to get married. It was highly frowned upon and very illegal. So they got married and they ended up taking my brother back to Russia and then kicking him out. And it took many, many months to get Svieta into Canada. And I got to meet her, and she was very, very much what you would consider, the strong accent, this strong-willed woman who I immediately adored and fell madly in love with, but she was definitely a mentor. And I can remember and she wasn't because she was overly sweet, it was because she spoke her mind. And I remember when she met me, I was probably only 13, 14 years old, and she came into my home. And to me, it was just a very basic home. And she said, oh, you have so much. You have a bedroom, you have clothing, you have food on your table. And she'd tell me stories about just to get food, she'd have to stand in lineups, and at the end of the line, there may be no food to be had. And just, it really, at 13 and 14, it was the best thing in the world for me to experience and hear firsthand from this passionate woman of what life was like outside of Nova Scotia. And it had a really big impact, and it made me appreciate so much of what my life had. And I think it had a big, big effect overall.
Sounds like more gratitude kept in,
Yeah,
right? It just crept in right at that moment, you know?
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I was one of those children that would ask my family for much, you know, but I think it was because of the effect Svieta's words had on me growing up.
Mm. That's so interesting. Okay, so Hope, we want to know, how can we help? How can we donate? How can we make a difference? There's a whole bunch of ideas on your website. I wondered if you just wanted to talk about a few of them. We could start with maybe animal sponsorships. How does that work?
Yeah, we have every year we might add an animal to the sponsorship, and we have people that year after year after year for a Christmas gift to their grandmother or their mother or whatever will buy this sponsorship. And it's very little paper because we want to be kind to our environment, but it has like a little bumper sticker, a little story. So you can sponsor a bald eagle or a bobcat or whatever you so choose. And that's been very successful with us to help fundraise. Um, because I come from an accounting background in my studying, I look at things to make this work. We don't get government funding. So I look at a whole bunch of different things. We make a calendar every year, and that brings in a bit. So we love it when people buy our calendar every year. It really, really helps. There's so many different ways to give. And if you're in Nova Scotia, we cover the whole province. I now have triage centers all over the province where wildlife can be brought in and stabilized, and then got to make the rest of the trip here to Hope for Wildlife. So we have over 250 people that help us get these injured animals into us. So that's really, really cool too. But
Wow.
you know what? Number one is when someone remembers us in their will and they leave a little bit of a legacy, a little bit of something for for us or for any charity. It's just, you might think that $1,000 or that small gift doesn't mean a lot. It means a ton to small charities. And that's how that really, really helps us a lot.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I hear that you also have a Build for Bears campaign that's new.
I know, because we now have permission to rehab black bear, we have to build anywhere from a half acre to an acre unit. And it's not cheap. It's a lot of fencing and it's got to be strong. Even though we'll be starting with smaller black bears, they grow up very quickly. So it's got to be a beautiful unit. We're going to break ground in the spring as soon as all this snow leaves us. So can't wait to get started on it. And we've been really pushing to get enough to get that fence in. And we're really hoping that by this year, this summer, we'll be able to rehab some black bear cubs. Really, really
Wow.
hoping that we can make that happen.
So exciting, so exciting. Now, how can people get a hold of you?
I mean, the easiest way, of course, is pick up the phone and call, email, text. I love text. It works quick and easy. Um, People do use snail mail. Just send us a card or a note. But we're easy to find. You can go to our website, hopeforwildlife.net, and it's all there. And you can help by buying a gift online too. A part of that, once we pay for the cost of the item, all that money goes back to us to help us do what we do.
That's great. So just check out the gift store online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Hope, this has been amazing. I've loved having the chance to meet you. I love how your mind works and how well you were able to explain what it was like to harness that passion you had as a kid, follow your instinct when you wanted to pursue a type of job that had, it was still admin type of job, but it was in a place with people that you were very attracted to in the veterinary space. And look what happened. Look what you did. You followed
All
your
the people
heart.
that came along.
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. The grit and persistence and perseverance it took for you to bring this dream to life. And thousands of animals are alive as a result of your efforts and all the volunteers and all the support you've gotten along the way. So I'm so glad we were able to do this and connect for Podcastathon. And I am so excited to also be somebody who's one of your supporters going forward.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you do. It's amazing.
Thanks so much, Hope. All the best. What a story. I am blown away by Hope's life's work and her ability to dream big and reconnect people with their natural world through wildlife rehabilitation. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please visit www.podcastathon.org to discover hundreds of other associations through the voices and talents of amazing podcasters from around the world. And if you're anything like me, I know that I want to meet Hope in person the next time I'm in Nova Scotia. I'll be all over her online gift shop too, and I can't wait to support this amazing cause. To make a donation and support Hope for Wildlife, please go to www.hopeforwildlife.net. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. Please remember to share it with your friends and other midlife gals that you know would get a lot out of it. Being the queen of your brain domain really is the best way to be. It's time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the happiness, excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you crave. Remember, if you need coaching support for the changes you're excited to make in midlife, I am here for you, and I offer group and private coaching. I also have something new, and it is a great place to start. If you're ready to stop circling clarity and start leading your life with intention, let's talk. Go ahead and book your autopilot audit at www.talktosusie.com. For show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 451. And you'll also see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.